Okay, so the snap ring that I was waiting on came 2 days early, so the goal for the day is to get the 4L80 with the trans brake completed all back together by the end of this video. So this is an intermediate snap ring. It's a spiral lock snap ring. This is what I was waiting on. So I'm replacing the factory thin snap ring with this guy. All the drum modifications are already done. The pump is done. That's all ready to go back together. The rest is just doing valve body work and putting the valve body on. So we're close. Let's get it finished. My first time using a snap ring like this for the intermediate, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes together. What I'm going to do is separate it, and then I'm going to try to put the bottom in and then kind of spiral it all the way around. Alright, so I do have the opening in the 9 o'clock position over here where the two ends are, but it does have a full loop all the way around, so pretty cool. I did measure the thickness and it's 88 thousandths. So it is a little bit thinner overall than the factory snap ring, but it's wider. It has 2 layers and it makes a full wrap all the way around. So I feel like it should be better than the factory snap ring. So my clearance before was about 75 thousandths. I'm going to use a feeler gauge and I'll put 75 in there and see what it comes out to. So 84 goes in there pretty easy. Alright, so 90 thousandths goes in there pretty snug. So that's still technically within the factory spec. It says in the book it can go up to 107 thousandths. Okay, so one interesting thing I found about this ring, and I don't really know if this is good or bad, but it does kind of rock back and forth. So now if I lift this up, and then I can lift on the center, kind of snaps. It's like going like this, and then you push it and it snaps back down, and then it snaps back up. So I wonder if over time that all that rocking would be bad on the lugs. See that? So I'll leave it in there and I'll report back with any issues, but just something that I found. So if you guys have ever used this ring, let me know. So we'll go ahead and put our band in next. I did just put some fluid on it before I put it in. For good measure, I'll go ahead and throw the direct drum in. There we go. Now the forward drum can go back in. Make sure my bearing is on, or a thrust washer if you're using a thrust washer. There we go. That guy drops in pretty easy. You can put the overrun drum in. Alright, now you can put the pump on. I'm going to go ahead and torque all these to 18 foot-pounds. Alright, so I did just get done checking the front and rear end play with my little dial indicator here. So the front ended up being 9 thousandths, the rear was 7 thousandths, so front is about 2 thousandths more than the rear, which I believe is pretty good. So now I'm going to flip the thing upside down and then we'll work on getting the valve body back together. But now that that stuff's all measured, I'll go ahead and put my center support bolt in and then the 4th drum bolt. Alright, so next we're going to take the reverse servo, take the 1-2 accumulator piston out, and we're going to take these 2 seals off. We don't need those, it's part of the trans brake kit. We are going to keep this seal on though. This is for reverse and you need that for the trans brake. Now the instructions recommend disassembling this whole thing so we can test the travel. So there's a little clip on the back side there, so we're going to push that clip off. Right, so I did disassemble the spring. I took this spring off of it, and there's like a little spacer section up here, and put it back together. Just for the sake of this test, I did take this seal off. I am going to be replacing it with a new seal, so it needed to come off anyways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this all the way in the bore, and I'm going to look for this spot to be flush. So this is in at an angle like this. So this is going to be the highest point. I want to push this into the bore to where it's flush with the case. And then I want to spin the output shaft. Output shaft should spin freely. And then I want to feel resistance as soon as it starts to get pushed into the bore. So watch, I'm spinning freely, and then as I start to push it down, it stops it. So, I mean, I can still pull on it really hard, but as you start to push it in, it doesn't travel that far before you see resistance there. So twisting, now it's already starting to be tight. And instructions say about 50 thousandths travel, and that looks like probably about 50 thousandths. So, see, I come up, now it's loose, down it's tight, so that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the new seal on right away, so we don't forget that. New seal's on. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the spring assembly back together, and then we should be able to put the servo cover on. Now putting the pin back together, get this little cap. This goes on here, then spring, and that little spacer goes inside this spring, and then that goes into the cover, just like this. Put the accumulator piston and the spring back in. I'm going to drop this back in the hole. Then I'll put the gasket on. I'm just going to push down, get this thing in there. I'll throw the gasket on and the cover. The front band servo in. Alright, so this time I got the check balls already installed so I don't drop it inside the case again. I ended up having to pull the whole thing apart and it was stuck inside the fourth drum. So there's one check ball, 2, 3, and 4. So those are in. Now valve body's ready to go back on. So let's do that. Alright, so moving on to the valve body here. Take all 4 solenoids that come with the kit. 2 of them are going to come up here. You'll be able to tell because these ends are cut off and they take the same plug. These are both the same plug. Then you have your shift solenoids down here. They take a different type of plug and the length is different here, so you can't accidentally swap these. I did put the torque converter solenoid in, and next we got to take the EPC solenoid and we're going to take these 2 little filters off here, and then we're going to grind a flat spot into the center section. And it'll look something like that. I just use a needle nose and then crack the filters off and then bench grinder, flat spot. Alright, next we'll take the harness that comes with it. So this one has the red and black wires, and then these plugs can go in either solenoid. They're just split like this. So one gets a positive. So one positive goes to both solenoids, one ground goes to both solenoids. So we're going to flip this thing up this way. One other thing I did do was use some assembly lube on the gasket, just so I can flip it over and it's not going to fall off. I also did take the separator plate off and I double checked the holes. It's an aftermarket separator plate with factory gaskets, so I just wanted to make sure that all of the holes were punched in the gasket that needed to be. I also did take the manual valve out of the old valve body, put that in here, and I'm going to make sure that the manual valve is in the selector, just like putting a normal valve body back on. I'll go ahead and start putting some of the bolts in. Alright, so I got all the valve body bolts down. I did put the pressure switch on and a new wire harness in there. I have these wires coming out to the side. This is going to be to activate the trans brake. And the EPC solenoid we're just going to leave unplugged. So you can just kind of set this off here. Torque converter solenoid is plugged in. A and B solenoids are plugged in. I got the lube port back on. Manual valve is in the selector. Detent is holding the selector down. And then probably next video I'll go over the trans brake wiring, because I feel like that's going to be its own video. So, and now that I think about it, I probably should have just did that when I had the harness out. But here's what it looks like.